peculiar and bizarre things that we discovered. It was just simply, it's just basically an accident that we found ourselves in this situation. As I said, it's suboptimal now. I think, so I think that one of the things is that sometimes you talk about having rules there, and if we're down on a slippery slope, but if we grant this guy an exception where everybody, all hell is going to go, this is we're basically a gateway drug and leading to all sorts of nefarious instances. We had slavery years ago, and that was the rule of the law, and we cannot never change our laws. Times change, and I think just because laws are laws, and whether you follow kosher prescriptions from 2,000 years ago, and you have to yes, some people want to follow, be kosher and maintain religious prescriptions, but time moves on. We learn things and we evolve. And you want me to finish?
You were able to bring up race and a variety.
I've heard this saying that this is we're a slippery slope.
Just bringing a little levity to it. That's all.
Okay, you were just saying that we have to have these rules, and it was, as I said, it was totally unintentional on our part that and we wanted to use it, and if it satisfies you, it's going to be suboptimal. We wanted to use the whole thing. We're not going to be able to use the whole thing that we want. And I think from Garrett Park's point of view, eventually we may want to sell the house, and it'll be more valuable to the house. Where we've gone through the growing pains of seeing that this porch as it is not as functional. If we sell it, the value of the house will improve, and the neighbors will benefit from that, but also the neighbors will also benefit from that. So it's not just hardship for the neighbors or us. It's benefit for our neighbors, and we're not. This will hopefully benefit Garrett Park by doing this too.
I remember those arguments when my
You
husband
could have
and I
parties,
were
better
doing it.
parties.
That's correct. We can indoor put and use it all year round.
See?
Right now, we don't use it.
So I have a question, if you don't mind me asking, and I am going to apologize in advance if I missed an answer to this. Were you planning to take down part of the what would be an internal wall here if you close it in? Was this exterior wall currently going to come down?
Not the interior. No, that's
So
right.
this yellow, the yellow front siding here is, not that it's going to stay yellow, I don't know, but that siding is going to stay in place?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I would have loved not to be honest with you. That was my original plan, but unfortunately we have to keep it there. And now we're sort of going to use it more. Instead of it, right now we don't really use the porch, and now hopefully we'll use it 3 out of the 4 seasons. So it'll be better use and better value for our house and better value for the rest of our neighbors if they ever decide to sell their house.
It's like the old sleeping porches back in
Yeah.
the late 1800s that, carried forward and then people eventually closed them in.
Yeah.
They usually were started closed in. So they're screen porches generally.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Just,
I would like to say that we don't make the rules. We are participating in the rules. The rules reflect what the community has put in place. And the ordinance process that we went through 8 to 10 years ago involved a lot of the community. So it's a little bit disingenuous to suggest that it's sort of our domain. We're here, and this is the hardest thing about being in the council, when you have to say to your neighbors, you can't have because, I hope you can or cannot have, because the rules that we in the community establish are in place, and they are what they are. We're not interpreting the rules so much as we are saying, does this proposal fall inside or outside of the And it seems to me, it's pretty clear that it falls outside. If it was originally intended, I mean, if the porch was originally granted as an open porch because that made an accommodation for the setback, then that is the rule. And the minute you change it into something else, it changes the intent that the community had for what we should be doing and how we should be managing our open space.
So what is the rationale behind that? What is the rationale behind this
It's like
particular?
everything else, there's a rationale that says that we as a people decide not to drive 100 miles an hour on the Beltway. We instead decide to drive 60 miles an hour on the Beltway. There's posting, there's enforced equally applied to everybody. And
Better slow
equally,
down.
there are lots of cases where communities and entities decide to have a set of rules to live by. And yes, we have the exceptions, but the exceptions have to fall within a specified set of guidelines. In this case, it's either hardship, it's unusual topography, which is not really relevant in this case, because whether or not you can build a porch in the back or enclose one in the front are two separate issues. It's not one or the other, it's two separate issues.
Does hardship have a definition?
No.
It's very subjective.
In the past,
So-
hardship has been used to describe taking in an elderly relative and requiring changes to accommodate that.
So it is, Dan, there is a very specific section of the ordinances that's established for, granting variances. We have the rules, and then we have the variance procedures. So, of course, hardship is going to be on a case-by-case basis, but I will read the following conditions that do not constitute hardship or difficulty as these terms are used herein. 1, alleged violations of this chapter by others. Obviously, because your neighbor did it, doesn't mean you can do it too. This is my editorializing. The existence of nearby non-conforming uses, the granting of a waiver or variance on other lots, any condition that results from the actions of the applicant or the existence of a building constructed in violation of this chapter. So those are what a hardship cannot be, which is one of the reasons I asked the question I did about is the current homeowner the one who built the porch, because I think that becomes relevant in the question of whether a hardship can be said to exist under the variance process that we do have established. So I think that's something that we have to consider.
Thank you.
So it says what a hardship isn't? Is there anywhere where
Correct.
it says what a hardship is?
Well, I can do a reading from the book of the ordinances, or I can pass it down so that you could see it. Essentially, the variance section gives the purpose, and that is to enable a variance where the strict and literal enforcement of the chapter would result in peculiar or unusual practical difficulties to, or exceptional or undue hardship on the owner of the property. Then there's the procedure, I think I should probably just pass it down to you, but it gives, there's a lot of specific details in here about
So your point there would be
the
that
conditions. I'll let you look at it.
the rules as they are have created this dead, useless space, and therefore that is the hardship that you're trying to cure. I'm just.
Yes.
Is that, I think the
Don't
rules
wanna
are
do a
rules
reading.
that need to be followed, and I don't really think it's sensible that we're put in a position to, why would we always just want to say like, yeah, of course, we can make an exception to everything, right? So I'm inclined to want to follow the rules or put us into a gray area that it's clearly gray. What I'm
I
seeing
would
is,
say this is gray, and this is my reason. And I mentioned it before about the timing, Dan, but because over history, we have been changing our ordinances to fit the culture of this town. The other point is what Charles made. I don't know how many people, when this ordinance was getting developed 8 years ago, considered whether a hard enclosure with, drywall and all of that was any different than putting in, a glass facade. So in my mind, you know, we are actually, you're unaware of this, but I know that the land use committee is, you know, reviewing the ordinance in general for construction
We're not.
of buildings. Well, they're looking at some specific areas to modify. That was my
One.
last understanding. Anyway, we could once again be in a place where, you know, we're changing ordinances to make it a little bit more, you know, easier for homeowners to live in the 21st century. So my point is just that, one, it's a timing issue. Ordinances have been changing over the years. And two, you know, there is, to me, a difference between, you know, the hard drywall, hard facade versus a glass facade. And to me, those are different.
Okay.
And you know, variances are here to help homeowners. And if they meet the basis for at least making a request for a variance, then that's allowable. So there's been a lot of homes built here. Not many have had to have variance requests. I mean, our house did. But I wouldn't say it's the general rule of thumb that every new construction's been coming forward with a variance and that the variance has been approved. There haven't been. That's not the way that the construction has been going in this town. So, you know, it's the exception, and the exception is when the variance comes forward, and there's a legitimate basis for allowing this variance to be requested by the homeowner. That's what I can find.
Just a couple points about what you were saying. Appreciate what you were saying, but an enclosure, it's just a screen or a glass or a wall. They're all the same. It's anything as an enclosure. That's why you can't build a screen porch in the front, let alone a glass, let alone a wall.
Says, right?
Sorry?
That's what the ordinance says.
It says an open
But
porch is allowed.
And my point is that the ordinance was written specifically like that. I mean, does it say that it can't be, does it describe what a closed-in?
I don't know if
Space
Garrett Park
size?
does or if it's the county it does, but they even clarify that it can't be a screen. Because like I have a screen porch on the back of my house and I have the same problem you do. It gets all dusty and dirty and all. It's a pain in the butt. Some very like
That sounds
sympathetic
like
to
a
it.
hardship to me.
It is a hardship. But well, we don't have a screen porch on the front because it's, you know, that's
That
not,
sounds like a hardship. I mean,
yeah,
you want-
well, yeah.
Definitely
but-
a hardship.
But on a serious note, the closure is anything that encloses that porch. And I think, George, you raised a good point. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to this situation, but on one hand, on the other hand, you could have built an addition on the back and down the hill, which is very common around town, instead of building on straight up. And what I think, George, you raised a good point before, as a mid-century modern house. So like taking the balustrades, replacing that, and putting it in a sheer glass, making it more of a cube again, I think it's an improvement to it, but then it does open up a very serious slippery slope. It's not a joking matter, it's a slippery slope. What it would basically set the precedent for is anybody that has a house that's existing in front of that setback could come back and say, we want to build straight up from what it is. They could build a big blank facade in front of it, point at this one as an example of it. I'm not sure how we guard against that versus, you know, just saying we're going to deal with it as a variance on every one of those cases and then have a judgment call of, you know, is it improving the block or improving the house like it would be potentially for yours, or is it not? Then I think it makes it even harder versus the town is kind of stuck to this 30-foot setback. And I meant to check it earlier, but I just checked it now. So the county has zoning rules, and Garrett Park can make things that are more restrictive. We can't make things that are less restrictive. So the county has a setback of 30 feet for the R90 zoning, which is the backbone of our zoning. We couldn't have changed ours to make it any less than 30 originally. So it's really just falling in line with what the county is. So even if Garrett Park doesn't allow it, the county, or Garrett Park allows it, the county wouldn't allow it either. It's within both of those zoning regulations. Yeah.
We work in every county in the state of Maryland, and we have, there's not a county that doesn't have, you're correct, a setback for front. And that's why we have variances, and with hardships proven and whatever, we do get exceptions to those. So I'm just saying, we understand the rules, folks, But that's why you have variances and exceptions and hardships to deal with these things. So I hear what you're saying. It's certainly Montgomery County, because Montgomery County, all the counties are working
Yeah.
stringent. But we get the variances.
Yeah, it's clear, it says it right here, it's, minimum setback for the county is 30 feet in R90 zoning. There may be cases where they've accepted that. I
They
don't.
have. They have.
Yeah,
That's all I.
there hasn't been any in this town.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Meaning that even if the homeowner clears this hurdle, you still have to apply at the county level for the same,
Mhm.
right?
County generally will go with what Garrett Park Zonies has determined, but, I mean, they, doesn't mean they have to.
I guess in answer to Hans's comment about 100-mile-an-hour speed limits and 65 miles, there's a rationale behind 65 miles an hour. There's safety, and there's, saving on gas mileage, and so there's rationale. It's not clear to me what the rationale is that it can't go up. How is it, is this going to cause safety issues? Is this going to cause blight to the neighborhood? Is this going to impinge in damage and harm our neighbors, or? It's just, the rules are the rules, and that's it.
No, the rules are the ones that the town chose to make. It's not that I made those rules, and we have an obligation to try to abide by those rules. That's our charge as council members when it is the variance, when the variance application comes up, is to, does the applicant's case make the case that there is in fact hardship as opposed to inconvenience, or want to have versus need to have? Quite frankly, I don't see in this case, I think it's an inconvenience to get dust and furniture, but it's not a hardship.
Well, that's subjective though, because you said
Let
inconvenience.
me,
Oh, no, this is a dialogue.
the fact is that we as a town chose to adopt the rules that are in place, and they're not my rules, they're not necessarily the council's rules, and certainly wasn't this council, with the possible exception of me, because most of the other council members were under council at that point. But the fact is that this represents a very difficult situation
Yeah, sure.
for members of the council, because we have to make decisions based on whether or not the rules that the town adopted apply in a given case. And I think in this case, the rules, it's very clear about what a front porch should be. It's very clear that it should be open as opposed to enclosed, and the kinds of enclosure don't, in my view, really matter that much. It's one versus the other. And the reason that the open porches were allowed was to try to accommodate people who wanted to make more use of their house than they had without penalizing them for the 30-foot setback. And that's where we are.
That was also for the culture of the town, which
Well,
is pretty much a porch-friendly town. But I think we've probably had enough discussion on this now, and I'd like to go to the,
Right. I mean, I feel that we're being penalized for our neighbor, this is ancient, we were never.
Ancient, and I guess to correct a point that Hans would make, when the ordinance was made for town of Garrett Park, it wasn't something they chose to make it 30 feet. The county already had 30 feet. So the town could have chosen to say, well, we value open space even more. We want 35 or 40-foot minimum, which is that's the case with the side setback. So in the county, you can do 8 feet, and I think you can do 7 even on the other if you have. So you have a total of 15, whereas this town has 10. This town chose to be more restrictive on the side house, or on the side setback, to keep the houses more spread apart, side by side. They chose, and I think I know the reason why, I could speculate, but it's probably not that important. They chose not to make that setback further back than what the 30 was that's already in the base zoning. So it's not as though that was deliberated other than choosing not to move that further back. So I don't think, just to point to you, I'm sympathetic to the situation. I don't think anybody here is not sympathetic to it or takes light of it. It's just, it's not an easy decision to, you know, have to make something like this that could set a precedent. So-
Let me ask this question then. Does this enclosure need a county permit as well as a
Mhm.
town permit?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I guess I must have missed that part. So this would require a county variance as well as a?
Yeah, but they pretty much take the lead from the town.
Oh, I see, okay. Just to make sure that we would be talking about 2 variances then. Phil? Are you reading from the book of Jane? Yes. Do you have any opinions or questions or?
May I take 30 seconds?
Please.
Sure.
I would like to say that we appreciate your time and serious consideration. I would like to. I'm Heather Chen Mayer, the co-owner of the house. So I wanted to say that it's all Al Richter's fault.
Yeah.
In 1948, and I looked into the history of this, Nancy Waltz came up with an interesting history of Garrett Park, but this is one of the story that Al Richter decided, I'm going to put 4 houses along Keswick Street, and they shall be offset, 2 in the back, 2 in the front. So we happen to be in the one in the front, so our both neighbors are set back. So I remember almost 10 years ago now, when we did the addition, Doug Mader was heroic effort that came up with this tremendous compromise in town and got it passed with an open porch. But at the time, we also pointed out that if we were our neighbor in the back, this would not be an issue, but we just happened to be in the front. In those days, there was no such thing as setback, right? Al Richter just, he's at whim, put it there, put it there. So we're kind of, sort of part of our history is that, okay, Garrett Park, and this is, things shall be. So I wanted to tell you that we did take that into consideration. We want to maintain the characteristic of these houses. We keep this matchbox footprint, we go straight up, and that wasn't allowed. Of course, as you know, that additions is much more difficult than raise the house and build from scratch. So we could have said, well, we just raised the house, we built setback, and we wouldn't have any all this hassle, it would be easier, even cheaper maybe, but we respected the Garrett Park characteristic, and we even talked to Doug, say keep the roof the same style as the neighbors, so we were minimally intrusive. And to be honest, right now the open porch, it's.
Oh, I'm sorry, why? Stop.
Okay, so the hardship aside, this is a harmony that Mr. Martin, I never spoke with you, but what you brought up is, you said very well what I couldn't articulate. It is how the house fit in better with the street. So in terms of hardship, it's a a covered porch is much more difficult than an open porch. Rain will wash off everything. Right now, nothing. There's no where you cannot really put water on it. There's no dust for water to go. So the only way to clean it is to mop, and so that is difficult, and we just basically can't use it. So I would appreciate your special consideration. We're not asking you to break the rules, we're asking for a variance to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Is there somebody else who would want to speak on behalf of Heather and Ron, or we're good? Okay. All right. And once again, I want to bring everybody's attention back to that the approval of a variance in this case would be in harmony with the general purposes of the ordinance and would not be contrary. So I just want to remind people that is stated in here. Would the council like to vote on this tonight? Would you like to wait and ponder this? How would you like to proceed?
We don't have to vote on it technically, do we? We could wait until the next,
Pardon me?
could we wait until the next month?
Well, I don't know if the homeowners can wait till the next month, but that's a fair question. But how does,
Is it gonna
is there any, how are people?
I'm very
I know where Hans stands.
I mean, the only reason I ask is I do generally feel sympathetic about this thing, but it is very clear what the zoning says, and I have a great concern about this being a slippery slope of what it is, but then maybe there's a way around that. That's what I just don't know. So say in theory this was approved because of the way the houses are jogged, and it's not going to really change the harmony of the street, and it's only a couple of feet. You know, what does that change? Like the house next door to this one is in front of that setback. What's to keep, you know, how does this council act with there's a variance for that, and they want to build straight up
So
for years?
that is actually, let me interrupt because I haven't answered the question. An objective answer to the question. Our variance processes specify that no one variance shall be a precedent for another one. So they are all one-offs because our lots are unique, and at least for I think that we've done 3 since I've been on the council. They've been completely different situations every time.
Yes.
So I'm not concerned about, you know, after après-moi le deluge, right?
Yeah, but then on the flip side of that, it does also say any condition that results from the actions
No,
of the
that's also
applicant.
true,
which
and I'm
This
struggling
literally
with
could have
that.
been built on the back, which, like I said before, is very common around town. So it's a predicament, this one here.
No,
And
it is.
It seems to meet all the checklist of the questions for variance approval. I mean,
Well,
it's a matter of
except,
debate about number 3, the hardship, but
but those aren't the only, so those are the questions the committee may answer, but, you know, our process isn't here, and the one
Hardship's
that
the one
gives.
people remember, it's not the only one.
Right, the one that gives me pause is that it is not a hardship or difficulty when it's a condition that results from the actions of the applicant. So,
does it result from the actions of the applicant because the applicant merely tried to basically build something to stay within the limits of originally within the limits of the law?
Well, but it could have been built a different way. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm not voting yet, I'm just saying, I
This
think
one wasn't.
it's a tougher one than other ones we've seen, in my
Yes.
opinion.
This one wasn't done with intention, but another person could come along and say, well, I'll build something that purposely complies now with the idea that later on I can beg for forgiveness to
Of course.
do something different. You know, and granted, it does say that, you know, granting one doesn't mean
No,
the other
I think it's
has to be, but
challenging.
it's just, if
I mean-
it hasn't been done, period, in this town, that, to my knowledge, anything that's been constructed new in front of that setback, and it's the county line,
But was
that's what makes it hard.
the original house footprint violated the setback, right?
Well,
But
the
the
house was
setbacks
built
change it.
before the setbacks.
Right, no, I know that, but
No,
I'm saying.
That I understand, and I think that's, you know,
So code
I mean, Richter
changes.
just threw houses wherever he felt like
Right,
it, right?
and so as a result, though, by them going up, they ran into the problem where the second
No.
story couldn't be built because of the
Right, I
fact it
know,
was
the law
behind.
came to them, they didn't.
Right, so that's where,
No, I know, that's
I'm not sure.
really challenging.
And this town doesn't have a way to make an ordinance that, again, can be less restrictive, or more, less restrictive than the county. So we couldn't have made a 25-foot setback. We could have made a 35, but
Right.
the reason I bring that up again is that it's very common around town that you have a house that's a little bit in front of that 30, and they don't seem like out of place. And again, I guess I'm belaboring the point. It just does make this one kind of a quandary, but then that's what we got to weigh about, and that's why I asked that question. Maybe if it's not urgent to know it tonight, maybe the county council can have some more discussions if people are open to that, just to kind of see, like, how big is the can of worms that this opens. It's definitely a can of worms. I just don't know how.
Well, this is an
Ridiculous.
entirely subjective opinion, but, I walk down Keswick, I live around the corner, this feels setback because it's got nice landscaping in
And
front.
it's a
so it
tiny
doesn't-
little street too, so it
It
makes
is a
that
tiny
heightened
little
set.
street,
Yeah.
and of course, all the houses are completely different, but this is entirely subjective and nothing to do with the ordinances, but, I have to say, in terms of the existing porch and the facade of the house, not being an architect, I wouldn't have guessed that was a Richter originally, but, this does give me a little pause in terms of the glass, and, again, I can't say that this is anything to do objectively with the ordinances, but I wonder if there's a way to make it look not quite so glassy and boxy so that it's not so jarring as at least, I imagine it to be from the.
I respect your opinion. I think it's a little dangerous, though, if we get into that.
No, I know, I'm just
Faction
saying,
opinion.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we don't have an
That's what I'm saying,
architectural
it's
review
totally
board.
subjective.
There's some houses on Shelley Court that have a lot of glass facade facing the street, so.
Well, but it's the, yeah, again, it's the, I mean, in terms of the point that was brought up before, in terms of, you know, the house as it was and trying to,
Think of the reflection of the great arboretum in the windows. Dan, can I suggest?
yeah, no,
Look, I
no.
am tremendously sympathetic. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been through a lot in this town, in this county, with the rules and the whatever. So I would like to be on the side of the homeowner. I am looking for a rule that I can follow to say this is sensible. And when I read your report and when I listen to you, I'm like, he supports it, he supports it, he supports it, you know, and then there's this conclusion, and I'm,
But the,
so that's what I'm looking for, so I don't know if, I mean, look, I think it's crazy that you have to go through this. I wanna say that. And I'd also say, bravo to you for being willing to go through the process, because the truth is, you could have just done it. And that's what a lot of people do, and that wouldn't have been right, and it wouldn't have been fair.
I thought that too.
I think our job is
Oops.
to like, be rational. And so they chose to follow a process, and then the process can be a buzzsaw. So sure, look, if you don't follow the process, then you're liable to deal with whatever buzzsaw comes next. I'm not advocating no following the process, but there shouldn't be an extra layer of, you know, punishment for someone who's trying to follow the process.
Can I ask a
But-
question? Stephen, and George, what was the votes of the other land use members?
I don't know what the vote was.
Do you know,
On this report?
on this?
It was
on this
unanimous
request?
on the report as written.
It was, on this request?
Does it go, it seems like it goes a lot to the policy if it's not a major town.
Restate, our
Yeah.
committee reads the ordinance. We try not to think. We read what is written, and where there's something that is the least bit subjective, it's the council's purview, not ours, and we don't want to take that.
And my understanding is it was purposely set up that way, so that the land use, it used to be a setback advisory committee, it wasn't seen as like a backdoor to, I want to do something that's a little wiggle room outside the rules, so I'll go bend the ear of person X, and I applaud you for your committee for looking at that,
Well, like
at things that
I
way.
said before, I think the committee's effort is to help homeowners do their desired improvements within the restrictions of the ordinance. And in some cases, that it's simply not plausible, and so it's a variance action, and it finds itself here. And to the mayor's point, in many ways, that helps the process of how the ordinance is written in the end, and issues that come up that need to maybe, that you see them come up again and again and again, and they need consideration by the council.
I was gonna say,
Go ahead, Phil.
so, I mean, basically, you had to come to this recommendation, because in strict interpretation of the rules, it did meet it, so therefore, you wouldn't approve it, and so that's why you said that you would recommend denial of the variance. I mean, that's where that came from, was from just strictly interpreting what was followed. But it's,
I'll say, we, as a rule, we read the letter of the ordinance, and we will deny any variance action, because we can't determine undue hardship. It's not our job. We're not able to do that. And we don't serve you well if we make a recommendation, because it's just 3 folks on a committee.
We'd almost be better off without the recommendation on that report.
thank you, that's what
Yeah.
I was getting there to myself, yes.
That's the way it used to be.
And that's where I would suggest the same.
So all
you
the
asked for that.
variances that have come forward weren't really,
In the past, we've been specifically asked to issue a recommendation, and so we did that. In one case, we declined to issue a recommendation, just once.
Dan, getting back to like, you know, just, and maybe refreshing everybody's recollection, in order to grant a variance, you know, the council has to find that there's grounds for relief on the basis of hardship. And when, you know, if, in considering that variance and considering whether to grant a variance on the grounds of hardship, the council has to consider two criteria. One is the net lot area, which obviously is not a question here, and two, as Kaki has said, it's, whether approval of the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes of this chapter and will not be contrary to the public interest. So hardship, affirmative finding of a hardship, and essentially an affirmative finding that the granting the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes of the land use chapter, and not contrary to the public interest. So, those are all subjective findings, but those are the findings that the council has to make to grant a variance. So the hardship is individual to the landowner, and then the bigger question for the council as elected representative of the town is, individual hardship versus the town's need to have the chapter respected and to have the overall purposes of the public interest respected as well. So I think, individual versus community.
I think Hans should feel like he's out on a limb. I'm not saying he is out on a limb, but our job is to follow the rules, right? So I think it's not that I'm trying to get clarity, but it sounds like there's a subjective clause in the rules.
Well, because
right?
there's the
That's
rules.
what
If,
you're getting at.
we don't have to have provisions for a variance, right? I mean, actually we do, because otherwise you could have takings. But the rules include the variance process. The variance process is not outside the rules, it's part of the rules. The rules are the rules, and then the variance process allows for an exception to the rule, but it's still part of the rule to grant the variance.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important clarification, that there has to be a process for exceptions, and that's what we have. And the question is, do we believe as a council that those conditions for an exception have been met in this particular case with the facts that we've been presented?
Just in general, I've been on the council for almost 2 years, and I think we had 3 or 4 variances, which sounded like it was unusual during that time, but they've all been approved. I'm a little bit worried that it's starting to become a precedent that almost everything, it used to be that virtually everything was not approved. Now it almost seems like anything's a hardship, anything is difficult. It's just something that's weighing on my mind a little bit.
Well, I don't see what enclosing it, how different it really makes it. It sounds beautiful with the reflection.
Starfall.
Uh,
Feels like I'm not going first.
Where you are?
Yeah, I think I'm probably opposed for the moment, because I don't think I have enough information to actually do my job, but I think that I would be in favor if, I think I could be in favor of this. I'd like to get some professional opinions on what a hardship is.
But you're not gonna,
So how are
that's
you?
subjective, that's,
Where can you get that
subjective.
yeah,
information?
you're not gonna get a professional opinion on hardship.
I wonder if we don't need to rewrite that.
Well, we do have an
We
architect
do.
on the panel, and I do.
Well, that's not their position to,
Professional opinion.
put him.
I've had this word hardship stuff down my throat by the Montgomery County Historical Commission, and I have a problem with that, and so I'm inclined, I think I could have represented the homeowner's argument here in a more effective way. Maybe I can work closely with them to help them do that.
Maybe that,
But it is important to me that
yeah.
but in practical sense, I kind of support exactly what Hans is articulating, what our job is. So as annoying as it would say, I would say I can probably benefit from doing this at the next meeting and understanding what the question is.
All right,
But
thank
you
you,
may
Dan.
see if there's a tie.
Okay, thank you. And Phil, do you know where you stand on this?
Yeah, I'm ready to vote. That's,
And Jane, do you know where you're standing?
You know, I will say that of the variances that we've considered before, there's been much more detailed applications given. And so I understand that it's a kind of a pain in the butt process, but it's not one to be taken lightly, because this is a very important job of ours in order to make a decision like this, which we realize does have effects on the way people want to run their lives and manage their property. You know, this is more than a pro forma process, and I think that the variances that we have seen in the past have had, you know, much more detailed information that has made it easier to make a hardship determination, at least for the three that I've seen so far. I'd be happy to vote now, but I also think that if there's more of a sense of holding it over to get more information, but I want to see that information coming from Mr. Harris's company as well as the landowners in written, documented form. I don't want another hour debate and discussion, because I don't think that moves the discussion forward.
Good, thanks. Stephen, you're probably,
I'm leaning,
either way.
I came in leaning no, but it's a tough decision, because it's, for all the reasons I think it'll be hard to move me off it, but that's why it's been a tough decision, so I might have a way of considering it a different way.
What information would it be helpful for you to see, and Dan, for the next
Wow.
meeting, and me, that we can
It's
ask
me.
in a
I mean,
concrete way, so that we're not...
I don't really need to seek a professional's opinion. I'm already a professional in this field. But the thing that's tough for me is that setback. I know the town didn't purposely make it deeper. It was felt like 30 was okay. We didn't really have, and we still wouldn't have the opportunity to make it 25. So I guess if we did allow it, it would still have to go through the county variance only. But then, as I was saying that before, the thing that gave me a little bit of pause is our backbone zoning is R90, which is generally a lot larger lots than the 10,000 square foot lots that we have. There's even a minimum that's higher, that's wider than the vast majority of lots that are in this town. So it's a little bit different. Like a 25-foot house is not, or 25-foot setback is not uncommon in this town, like next door. So that's the only thing that gives me pause. I don't know if that's really enough thing of it where we could legitimately say, grant a variance on that. It's just my architectural and planning thoughts on it. It may not be enough to sway it, but those are things that are swimming in my mind.
Thank you, Stephen.
what's the difference? Because they're not gonna change the setback anyway. All they're gonna do is either enclose it or not enclose it. And, the setback and the footprint and blah, blah, are all gonna stay exactly the same. It's the difference between whether there's air around three sides or whether there's gonna be glass around three sides, to me.
It's just, even though it does specifically say that you don't set the precedent, it does set the precedence. People would have the expectation.
2-2 tie, and if you break the vote and I abstain, you may be able to wrap it up right there. I'm just saying.
Well,
I call the
I'm not
question.
the majority or the minority whip, but I'm just theorizing on what might happen.
I hear the concern about definition of hardship and just whether there is a better way to have described that.